Good morning.
Welcome to Inside the Huddle.
All right.
Can you believe we're almost done? We're in the last full week of August.
No, I can't actually. This is after a year like we've had in 20. It's hard to believe. With a year that went by, it seemed like so slow that this year seems to be just flying by.
I think this right about now is the time to think, okay, there's a few months left in the year. We got the holidays coming when the rest of the real estate world takes time off. And this is the time to double down, make sure this is the greatest year we've ever had, which for a lot of us it has been. But August is that, okay, let's get revved up. September, it's going to come back. And I'm thinking when it comes back, one of the things we need to be able to do, Steve, is what when we meet with a client?
Oh, we got to secure the order.
You got to secure that order.
You got to get the employment agreement closed. Yeah, I try to use that word close, right? And people kind of shudder at that. And because maybe that's where we should start. Why do you think, Sean, so many of us, I know I was in the early stages of my career, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I wasn't afraid to ask a closing question. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you, why do you think so many of us, not agents, just because closing questions happen in life every day? I mean, it's so confident in being able to receive the answer, I think, where we ask closing questions. But in our business, why do you think it is that people are hesitant?
To use the word close or to actually close?
Both. Both.
I think, unfortunately, sales has a bad rap for a long time. Salespeople do an amazing job, but, the way we're represented in the media, we're manipulating people.
Yeah.
And a close would be the ultimate manipulation. And I'm sorry, for anybody who thinks you can manipulate someone into buying or selling a home, I got some news for you. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I've never met anyone that good.
No, neither have I. But why don't we close? I know you're feeding me a softball here. Because when you ask for the business, you have a chance of hearing no.
Right. And
nobody likes rejection. No matter how many times you ask for it, no matter how many years you've been in sales, none of us like to hear rejection. So we have to change that.
And that's where that comes, right? So the subsection to closing would be how do I confront the risk of my failure or a failure, which is you win or you lose in sales. You either secure the business or you don't. Losing is not the right word. It's too harsh. But you're not selected, and so you feel down. Yeah. If you ask those questions, that's the moment of truth, isn't it? So it's where the rubber meets the road, and you're going to find out whether you're close enough or you've secured the business. So
I would add my favorite word to your question. You've either won or you haven't gotten the business.
Yeah.
Yet is the most important word.
Yeah.
And that's where the mindset has to change, right? All that happens when someone says no is they're saying, you haven't presented the value proposition well enough yet. You haven't overcome my fears yet.
Right.
That's all they're saying.
Right.
I think I've brought this up here before, but it's worth repeating. The greatest salespeople in the world are children. If you want to be terrific in this business or any sales business, watch children because they possess the 3 traits that you have to have. They'll talk to anybody. There's no such thing as, I don't like to call a stranger. I don't want to be salesy with my friend. They'll talk to anybody. Number 2, there's no question too personal. There's no awkwardness around. They want to know something, they ask. And number 3, no means absolutely nothing to a child. Adopt those 3 strategies and you'd be great in sales. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, I've got like 3 thoughts fired in my head. One is, as I heard you talking about a child, what a child does is they're just persistent until they know they've hit, the road close sign. But they will keep coming back or asking the question a different way, seeking what it is that they want. And I think somehow when we go after what we want in a real estate transaction, it's when we're going after something we want, we're doing it in the best interest of someone else. Like in this case, you're an advocate for your client. So your goal here in closing is to try to confirm that they've got enough information to make a decision to move forward. So you're not overselling and you're not speaking to inattention. And the other thing is when you get the no or they're uncertain of something, you're able to determine where you've crossed a line where you didn't bring them up to speed or there's not enough information for them to make a decision. So what is a close, Sean? Like, let's make sure we all understand what a close is. And maybe if you wouldn't mind, or we can maybe discuss, should you ever close, or how important it is, I should say, to know the difference between an objection and an obstacle. Like how bad it would be to try to close on an obstacle. Can we talk about that?
Right. So yeah, you brought up a couple good things. And so I want to hit your first one. A close is simply, literally it's asking for the business, but what you're really doing is it's a continuation of a presentation that's done well. In the presentation, you've learned what their needs are and what their wants are. You've narrowed down their fears and you've answered their questions. And you've earned the right to ask for the business. And that's all a close really is. It's at the end saying, so are you ready to hire me right now to sell your home for you? And you have to adopt the mindset that you're going to close 4 to 5 times in any presentation.
Right.
They're going to have an objection, you're going to overcome it, and you're going to close again. Another objection, you overcome it, rinse and repeat. You're just helping them get past the fear. That's really what a close is. You're helping them get past the fear to see that the right move is to hire you to do the job they need. Now, your second question, though, was what's the difference between an objection and a
obstacle?
A true obstacle. An objection we handle. An obstacle we have to solve. My wife's in the Navy on a submarine underwater. That's not an objection. That's not something I can help them see their way around. That's an issue. That's we have to solve that problem and move forward. You're not going to close on that.
Right.
So don't try. That's where we get that bad reputation. We have to see the difference.
Yeah, the ability to distinguish the difference. One thing too that I've learned, and it's a little thing, but I think this is what Vince Lombardi meant when he said inches make champions, is that I learned over my career to not ask a closing question. I try to avoid. There are soft closes, and we're going to talk about that in a second, I believe. But when you really want to talk turkey and get people to commit, don't ask questions like that when people are standing up. Let's sit down and discuss, right? I mean, like a little thing like that is you think it's just so what's the big deal? It's so important that when you're trying to have a conversation and secure business, that people are sitting down and comfortable where you have a chance to have a conversation, where people, when they're standing on their feet and you ask a real closing question, it's not effective. For example, I've often talked about when I show a property, could you see yourself living in this home at any price? Right? Is this, and no, or what do you mean? Well, if they say, what do you mean? It's if you could get this home at X amount, based on everything you've seen here today, would you be willing to see what that looks like on paper? As if you were going to buy it. Here, sit down. Let's scratch this out to see what it looks like on paper. And now when I have them in the chair, we can then discuss their, further or drill down deeper on their objections. So it's a little thing that I learned, but it may make no sense. It means a lot to me.
What I hear you saying is, yes, you're reading the person.
Yeah.
I always think of this as you have to earn the right to ask for the business. You have to earn the right. You don't walk up to somebody with your hand out and say, why don't you use me to sell your home? Hand me $15,000, hand me $30,000. You have to earn that right. And that goes on in the presentation. And you can see it when they become comfortable, when they do sit down, when you're sitting side by side, whether physically or philosophically. That's when you know. And there are things we can do along the way in the presentation. There's things called test closes, right? Test closes are places where you check in to see if you're on the same page. You might say to them, so do you agree with me that if we do a mega open house, we're going to end up with more buyers for your home? Yes. That's a test close. They're agreeing with me on a thing that's a part of my marketing plan. And that yes makes me say, maybe I should start hustling along to the actual close.
Yeah, it's really important because you see you're aligning.
Right. And we also have tie downs, which is not a tie downs. A tie down is short questions, right? Like when you say to someone, this makes sense, right? We should do this. Don't you agree? You're home. You want the most money, right? It's little short questions, but you get them saying yes, or more importantly, with a tie down, what you really want to hear is, that's right. And your client says, that's right, and they're literally sitting next to you now. And you're on a really good place. So you're using these tie downs, and you're using mini closes, test closes, to see if you've earned the right, if you've gotten them over their fear. Steve, you're frozen. Oh, there you are.
Oh, can you? You know, a great situation, or I think a very good question, I should say, in a situation where you're expecting an answer to a closing question or even a soft close, and it's not the answer you were expecting. I've always adopted, because I think it comes from a position of curiosity, and you're seeking enlightenment, is help me understand.
Great.
It's a very powerful, soft question that aligns you with your client. You think absolutely this would have been the house for them, or you think that you've got the right price when you're in the listing presentation, you covered all your bases, and they give you the old, well, we still want to interview 3 other agents, or we want to interview that next agent that's coming in at 6, or what have you. Mr. and Ms. Wojciechowski, help me understand. Was there something in my presentation that is preventing you from at least committing to whatever it is that you can sense is the objection or the concern that they have? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. There's your tie down.
Yeah.
So, and that's how varied it closes. When I say close, you think end of listing presentation, asking for the business. That's certainly what we use closes when you're prospecting and you ask for an appointment. That's a close. When you're sitting with a buyer and they're hesitant to write an offer on a home that fits their needs, that's a close.
Right.
We're closing all the time, and we're close. By the way, there's a line from a movie some people on this call will know called Glengarry Glen Ross. It drives me nuts. It's one of the famous lines where the Alec Baldwin character says, A, B, C, always be closing. And I got to tell you, I don't like, you should always close. But that's very different from always be closing. Always be closing is rude. It goes back to why salespeople have a bad reputation. I think ABC fits what you just said, Steve. Always be curious. Always be curious. Ask them questions. Explore. If they're not following down the path with you, find out why. Don't just keep moving and then put your hand out and ask for the business you haven't earned the right.
I think, I think when we talked, or in a discussion you and I had, we talked about tie downs being like a foreshock to the close, if you will, or a precursor to the close, right? Talk about why that's important. Like, what is a a form of a tie down question, and why is that important to have that kind of a discussion with those types of questions before you go for the final close?
So the tie down, I think of it as if you're taking someone along a journey, and it's not an easy journey. It's a scary journey. Think for a second. I'm going to go backwards for a minute. Someone's selling their home. What's going through their head? They're thinking, am I making the right decision to sell this home? Is this the right agent? Will I hire the right brokerage? Is this the right time to do it? Am I going to get the right price? Will I find my home? There's like 10, 12 questions, all of them big, all of them stressful. We're overcoming. You have to overcome all of that. That's what's really going on when they have objections.
Right.
So this is a windy, difficult path that makes them very afraid. All big decisions come with fear. We all know that. As you're taking them down the path, you want to keep checking in. Are you still with me? Are we still together? Are we still walking side by side? So those are the tie downs. And it could be basic questions. That makes sense, right? This marketing plan will net you the most money, won't it? A mega open house don't you agree? The one thing is, don't pick one, right? Don't repeat the same thing.
Yeah. It's annoying.
But it's any 1 to 3 word short question. You're just basically checking in to make sure they're still with you. And then occasionally, once or twice during the presentation, you'll move from a tie down to a test close, which interestingly, anyone can create a test close. That's not a script that we have to give you. A test close is simply an actual close wrapped up in another question. That's the fun part of our brains, right? Like fear is not well defined. Fear is not that bright, put it that way. So people feel fear, but if you ask them a question within a question, that confuses fear. It doesn't know what to do with it, and the truth usually comes out.
You know, in fear, by the way, it's funny. This is a really good segue for, at least for me to chime in. The word "if." If you see someone that's apprehensive during your presentation about whatever the pricing, whether or not whether the home will sell fast enough, if your home were to sell in 2 weeks, is there any outcome or I should say, would that outcome create any issues for you? If we were able to get $1.2 million, but not the $1.3 million that you were seeking, how would that impact your decision, or to either evaluate while evaluating the offer or your move itself? You know, I mean, you get where I'm going. I'm just thinking out loud here, but I've always tried to, like, if you could, or if you this, or if you that, allows you to ask a question that does seek an answer, right? It's an open-ended question that gives you an answer, but it allows you to see where you are again before you go for the close. Does that make sense? It's a tie-down question.
I would call that a test close.
Yeah.
You're wrapping a question within your first question is if. If we could get you the most amount of money, would you want to move forward now? Those are two questions in one. By answering the first, they're answering the second.
If Compass had a program, Mr. Seller, that could help you net the highest equity, at least we believe the highest equity, would that be something you'd like to learn more about?
Would that be beneficial for you? Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yes, you get you're that much closer to the yes on the dotted line. So just remember, it's such a simple thing, but using the word or using if
makes it easy to create.
Yes. Well, because you're not giving answers at that point. You're helping people self-discover what it is that they want and need when you're using the word if, right? So
there's a great everyday use of this. This is what I love about these techniques we learn, especially for those of you who have children. But you can do this with anyone. When you don't get the answer that you're looking for, you know there's an answer. Like you come home and the lamp is broken. Who broke this lamp? I don't know. Everybody says, I don't know. Turn to them and say, well, if you did know, who would it be? Well, it was me. They don't know how to answer the question within the question. Next time you talk to anybody and their answer is, I don't know, ask them, well, if you did know, what would the answer be? You'll be surprised by the responses you get.
Yeah. Or the body language is going to give you a clue, right? Again, you're part of this closing process is not so much for you to be listening to exactly what it is they're saying, but a master salesperson is really reading tonality and body language after they ask the question. Because you'll see people recoil, you'll see them kind of nod off, you'll see them lean in, like to join forces with you. It's so critical, of course.
You're looking for it. Like a takeaway close, you literally want to see them lean in. You're taking something from them, they lean in. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
They don't want that. And they'll argue in favor of closing now to get back this thing they think you're taking. Before we go to closes, this is a good time to mention when you're doing test closes, for instance, if, and then you ask a question within a question. I have 10 rules of sales. I'm going to give you the first 2 today because this comes up a lot. The first rule of sales is always close, which is what we're talking about today. Always close. Don't spend 45 minutes of a presentation to not close. What a waste of time that was. You left the client. You didn't even do a good responsibility to the client. Always close. But the second rule is never sell past the close.
That's right. Yeah.
If you've gotten a nod, if you've gotten a yes, if the test close is saying move on, stop selling, stop talking, and go to the contract. Don't sell past the close, which is very common for a lot of us salespeople because we like to talk.
You know, you say that, and one of the things when I was selling real estate, I to prevent myself from overselling, is once I got confirmation or they agree, yeah, we think you're the right person. Well, let's talk about communication. How do conflict arises when expectations differ. Wouldn't you agree, Sean?
Yes.
So in an effort to make sure you have an open line of communication, on a scale from 1 to 10, where 10 I'm being brutally honest with you, 1 I'm fibbing to you, how do you want me to be? So anyway, I go down that. I move into a whole other subject now about what the relationship will be like. what I can do to win with them, what they can do to win with me, and how we're going to go become successful in this business relationship, as opposed to continuing to needle in or talk more about stuff where they've already given you the yes. It's don't sell with blah, 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 when you can just sell with the blah. And
Right.
One way to do that is just to move on to expectations.
Once you felt it, once they said you're the one, you moved into the glide path. You went into your final close that leads to the contract.
Well, and that is a close, isn't it?
Right. It's absolutely a close.
Right.
So there's, and I know we're going to give some examples of closes, but I thought real quick, I wanted to give some examples of what is not a close.
Sure.
And we see this. I mean, Steve, I know you do, I do. We work with a lot of agents locally all over the place. And even in practice with us, they'll get to the end and say, so what do you think? What do you think is not a close? It's a question, but it's not a close. How do you feel about all this? Not a close. Even when I hear people say, so what do you want to do? That's not a close. At least it shows, it implies there's some next action. I mean, I guess that's good. Closes actually ask for the business. Will you sign this right now? Are you ready to hire me? Shall we move forward and get your home on the market tonight? Those are closes. What do you think? What should we do next is not a close, right?
Right. Yeah, because that leads to the you running into one of your colleagues or an agent, and how did your listing appointment go? Went great, really connected, had a great relationship. So you got the listing. No, they're going to think about it. They're sleeping on it, and we all know how that turns out. If 70% of the time, they're going to go in another direction if you left that home without the listing. So those are just hard facts.
Right. Odds are they're going to go with the next person who shows up who knows how to close.
And I'll tell you why. And this is why it's so important to ask these kind of questions. You will, absent of value, right? The cost is all that remains, right? But absent of value in you as an individual, chances are the next person coming in behind you is going to be some hobby type agent that will capitulate to some financial demand that they have, and they'll give them the business because in their mind everything seemed equal and they're cheaper. And equal would never be the case with you as a Compass agent. Equal comes across, or it feels equal, or that the perception is that you're no different than your colleagues in the business because there was a need or a concern that they had and you didn't ask the right question or you didn't close on it. So is there any reason for us not to go forward as a closing question? Well, we think we want to talk to another. Well, help me understand. Is there a question I should have asked that I? There's a closing question, right? I mean, right. Is there something that I should have covered? If you were in control of this meeting right now, knowing what it is that you need, and you could ask the questions, what questions should I have asked that I haven't thus far?
Right. Great question.
You're just trying to you're trying to take the walls down and not be confrontational. You want to put them back in control. Now they're almost like counseling you on what you could have done, and then boom, and then all of a sudden it comes together.
And that's the great part of reframing what a no is. When you ask for the business, when you close and they say no, that's your opportunity to ask those questions, find out what their objection is, so that you can help them get past it, because an objection is just a smokescreen for fear, but it's still there. We haven't presented a value. We haven't overcome that fear. We want to hear the no. If you don't get the no, if they just sign because they feel pressured, you're going to have a terrible client. We need to flesh all these things out. So a no just is an opportunity to explore what's still unsure, what they're still afraid of, and then go into your objection handler, do it, then close again.
Right.
So before we run out of time, let's go over some typical closes. There's a lot of them out there, but there's some that are really common and they have names. One of them, I'd say that the most common one is the alternate choice close. We use that all the time, right? Would you like to meet at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock?
Right.
Are you better in afternoons or evenings? Would you prefer a weekday or a Saturday? And the whole idea behind that is simple. When we have to make a big decision, that's hard. If you give me a small decision between two easy things, I can make it. But by making that decision, I've actually made the big decision.
Absolutely.
And the alternate choice close can be combined with almost any other close too. So you hear it all the time. You're going to continue hearing it all the time. The direct close, which is what I've been quoting a lot lately. Are you ready to sign the listing right now? Shall we move forward and get your home on the market this evening? That's just a direct close. You're literally asking for the business.
Right.
Steve, you love and practice a lot the soft closes.
Well, it's just like, is there any reason for us not to go forward?
Is there any reason not to go forward? Would you be all right if we took a look at the contract now?
Right.
That's a close. If they say yes, you're moving into the contract. Those are especially good with what we call the I's, high I's or amiables. When you're meeting with a high D, maybe we should do one of these on disc one time. But
right.
when you're meeting with someone who's direct, then you want to do a direct close. The people who like to talk, you want to do more of a soft close, work them into it. Another one is the assumptive close. You've heard that probably all your lives. Assume the sale. Just assume it's done. Okay, the last step now is to go through this contract, make sure you don't have any questions about that. I'm not asking them if they want to. I'm assuming they're going to, and just closing on it. We've agreed on price. Let's get to paperwork. That's an assumptive close, right? One of your favorites, one of the best things that I've ever heard that you helped create was the takeaway close that's used often at the beginning of a listing presentation. 3 things can happen. You may do, I may decide not to, or I may decide. When you say to someone, I may not take this listing. Listen, this may work out that I don't take the listing. And people, they lean in. What do you mean you won't take my listing? I am in charge. I may not want you as an agent, but I've never heard of an agent telling me. You're taking something away. That's a phenomenal close. I learned that from the masters, right? And some of the very best, almost all of them do use some form of that early on. And I think what the reason no one's really ever articulated, obviously success leaves clues, but I think that helps you from the very beginning speak to attention as opposed to inattention. When you can make a statement like, I may choose not to take your listing, does that make sense? And a seller, I've never had a seller not have some reaction to that question. Right.
It tells me they're listening, they're paying attention. So that may sound strange, so I'd like to explain. My number one objective, Sean, as we visit here tonight, is to understand exactly what it is you're needing. My goal is to exceed your expectations. And so the only way for that to happen is for me to ask questions and seek enlightenment. And if we come across a need or an expectation that you have of me or of Compass, then once I hear that, I know that it's not possible for me to fulfill that desire or that expectation. It's only then that I would choose not to take your listing. Is that fair? Oh, and you just watch them just roll back, and then they come back. Now, and
everything changed.
I've always felt like that's always got them to like me. It's crazy. It starts off like a very confrontational, some would almost say hubris or arrogant kind of statement, but when it's all put together, it's like it's a safe. You give them a safe way out. Right.
And that particular one, that 3 things may happen today, we could do 30 minutes on that alone. There's so much power and NLP and there's so much going on in that we could do a whole, but there is a little bit of hubris in the takeaway close, and you have to be careful who you're doing it with. I mean, that's a mid-presentation. A true takeaway close at the end would be something like, normally at this point we review the contract, but I'm not sure if this is right for you. Let's take a look anyway and find out. Or our marketing plan has a lot of very strong things that bring a lot of money to people. I'm not sure if it's the right plan for you. Shall we take a look at the contract and find? It's a tough close. You're making people say, wait a minute, you don't think my house deserves your marketing plan? It does. That's what you want. It does deserve your marketing plan, damn it. And now they're arguing that they should list with you. But you have to be careful when you use it and how you use it, what your tone is, because you are taking something away from them psychologically.
I think
we out of time.
I think so. Yeah, right on time. But just remember to be mindful of your tonality.
Always.
You could ask a really hard question, but if you do it in a way, is there any reason for us not to go forward here? I always find that when I'm going for the yes, that I kind of lower my pitch. I'm a little bit slower in my cadence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't, because I think when we're nervous, when we go for the ask or we go for the closing questions, sometimes our nerves can just kind of bring our pitch up ever so slightly.
Right. And you want to soothe them.
You just want to be really calm, really, because if you're calm when they tell you no, then it allows you to kind of keep moving forward without elevating.
Like it's not unexpected.
Right.
Sure. No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just remember that little thing.
Here's what I'll leave with, and we'll turn off the recording and then stick around for a few minutes, as always, see if there's questions. When it comes to asking for the business, when it comes to closing somebody, the single most important person that you're ever going to close is you. You have to know that you're what's best, that you have the tools, that you have the right brokerage, that you have the right people around you. If you don't close you, you're never going to close a client.